Welcome into Film Tank, the weekly podcast that covers both new and classic cinema. On this episode of Film Tank, we discuss our top 6 favorite films of 2018. If you would like to get in touch with Film Tank, you can always email us at filmtankshow@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Film Tank Show. And you can listen to all of our episodes on our website, filmtankshow.com, or on iTunes. And now, here are your hosts, Nick Cheney, Toussaint Egan, and myself, Alex Diekman. Hey there, everybody, and welcome in to part 1 of episode 180 here on Film Tank. I am Alex Diekman, along with Nick Cheney.
Hey!
Yeah. And Toussaint Egan.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Yes.
Bonjour!
Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour.
There goes the baker with his bread like always.
You love
There
that.
goes Toussaint going to Film Tank, Film Tank.
Wow, that was actually really good.
Yeah, it was
Well
not
done.
bad.
You love the Beauty and the Beast animated film.
Yes,
It's
I do.
like in your top 50, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that song is phenomenal.
It's up there. Speaking of top 50s, everybody see that Martin Scorsese put out his top 938 films of all time?
Damn,
What a
son.
number. You couldn't get to 1,000, huh, Marty?
I guess not.
Even Edgar Wright could. And he hasn't been on this earth as long as you.
Yeah.
It's factually true.
Yeah.
Speaking of top lists, on this episode, we are discussing our top 6 favorite films of 2018. We haven't done a lot of top 6 episodes over the last couple of years, and we probably should do more, but every year at the end of the year, these are always some of my favorite episodes that we've done, just because it's fun to look back at films we've reviewed on here, films that we've never even talked about before, so this is an awesome episode every year, so I am very much looking forward to the next hour and a half or so talking about our favorite films. So,
Hell yeah.
to be pretty crystal clear of what what we're doing here.
If you've been listening to us this long, you should know how this works, and you should know the logic of why we do top 6.
You tell them, Toussaint.
Yeah.
Speaking of Toussaint, why don't you go first?
Oh, thanks, man.
Since you're already kind of ready to go.
I'm ready to go.
Why don't you give us your 6th favorite film of the year, and also maybe some honorable mentions too, if you have some.
Okay.
Cool.
Number 6 was actually probably one of the hardest to actually choose, because it's right on that cusp of like, is it just an honorable mention, or is it something that I want to actually have it like canonized as like my last one? It's like, it's almost as hard as like number 1. So I'm going to start just with a grab bag of like some of my honorable mentions leading up to 6. Like, not going to talk about them a lot. Honorable mentions are Widows. I really enjoy Widows. I actually just watched it today, and I don't understand why this had such a muted response when it came out. I think it's a perfectly competent film. It may not necessarily like speak to the prestige of like the director's like past work or even the screenwriter's past work, but I think rather as sort of an ensemble like heist film, it definitely doesn't like, it doesn't punch anywhere near like the heights of like Heat. Okay, it's nowhere near that. Okay, let's not get crazy now. But it was a perfectly competent, well-made heist film that worked within very convenient paces, and it just seemed so it was functional. It was perfunctory, but had some really good like cast like performances all along. That's the problem with an ensemble cast like that. You have so many strong actors, and they just sort of like glob into one another instead of like really bringing out like a lot of the best. I guess that's where one of the criticisms come out of. Revenge. I watched Revenge with Nick. I love that film.
I do as well.
It was a great revenge film. It was with an excellent finale. Just this bloody firefight in this multicolored.
Don't forget about dicks.
Yo, there were a lot of dicks in there too. It was like, and it was. You could almost set that final scene to Benny Hill, and it would be just as fucking terrifying.
Oh yeah, they are literally slipping on blood.
They're literally like, it was like, holy fucking shit, and you could be like, yeah.
Just the dubstep version.
No, literally, like where you slow it down, it becomes like that creepy like horror movie twist music that you have like halfway through a trailer.
Yeah. I don't know if the Benny Hill music would work when she sticks her hand into his fucking liver, pretty much.
Yeah.
That might be a little bit.
Next up for honorable mentions is Sorry to Bother You. Now, I was really looking forward. I was looking forward to Sorry to Bother You a lot, and I think there are a lot of things that I enjoy about this film as a first-time
What
effort.
film?
Sorry to bother you.
Hey, man, it's cool.
It's all good. It's all good. Shut the fuck up. Are you sorry to bother me when you fucking interrupt me when I'm talking about sorry to bother you?
It's fine.
It's fine.
Oh, great. That's cool. Thanks. Sorry to bother you.
What are you looking at me for?
Yeah. Sorry to bother you is I think it's a good film, and there's a lot of moments in it that actually strike out as some of my favorite moments in film this past year, especially when Stephen Yeun is talking to the main character and being like, hey, man, if you show people a problem and you don't give them a means to actually address that problem, and they'll just grow to accept it and maybe even just inoculate themselves from it and to even internalize it into like sort of like a meme. Like
Helps it thrive.
Like, yeah, this gallows humor because you don't give them an agency to actually like address it. They just take it as like an ambient condition of their lived existence. And I'm just like, holy fucking shit. More people need to hear that, okay? More activists need to hear that. I think that it suffers from being a first-time film and a first-time effort in that you're trying to put so much into it that it doesn't really do the film a lot of favors. It's a great shock film. Like it was awesome watching it in the theaters and getting everybody's reaction. Even like going to see it multiple times, it was still kind of effective in that. But it doesn't. I haven't watched it since the theater.
I'm still, and I'm not. It doesn't change my opinion of the film at all.
Yeah.
But the fact that Boots Riley came out on the strong offensive against Spike Lee right after definitely gave me a negative connotation to his film.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was slightly unfortunate because I don't even know how. Well, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah,
Because I'm gonna get off on a tangent.
That's a whole.
But I
nother
agree with you in
conversation.
the sense that I was slightly disappointed after a movie that came out, like Sorry to Bother You, which was in no way perfect, that he would think that. I don't know, that would be well received. That like now that I have a platform, it's up to me to show everybody what is really going on.
I'm the black filmmaker now. I'm just like, even Spike Lee on his worst day, like he still made like Do the Right Thing. He still made like so many great films.
Shrek.
Let's not talk about that. So it's just like, why are you trying to slap box with God? It's like,
and it was just weird that somebody who would make such a surreal fantasy would get bent out of shape at another African American titan for not telling a quote unquote true story.
I think it's more to do with the fact of the politics of the portrayal of policing, and I think and I think that there is
but
definitely
that's also something he reads into it as a text.
Yeah, there are other. There's definitely a fault line in perspectives as that, and I can see like I'm not trying to play both sides in this sort of equation.
No.
Again, this is for a much longer, very different episode than what we're doing right now.
The thing is, though, it also wasn't a comment he just made in an interview. Like he went out of his way to write
he did that
damning piece on it.
While we're having this interview, I've already like written this 6-page screed that I was going to post on my Tumblr, but now I'm just going to read it to you and have you publish it. Anyway, moving on from Sorry to Bother You.
No, sorry.
Alex Garland's Annihilation. I love Alex Garland. I think that he is a great director, a great writer. Ex Machina is one of my favorite science fiction films of like the past couple of years. It's one of our best episodes. If you haven't listened to it yet, you should go back and listen to it because
it's one of our highest rated films.
Still, even though it was like
all
our
three of us.
first year.
It was a great effort. But I think that in adapting Jeff Vandermeer's writing, I feel like his whole concept was like, he read it once and he basically forgot about it, and he sort of tried to write it as though he was recollecting a dream.
Yeah,
that's what it feels like as a film. And while there are some parts of it that I really do enjoy, like the reintroduction of the one actress from Ex Machina as sort of the alien presence as a dancer, like I think that was one of my favorite moments of that film. There's a lot of really beautiful set pieces, but it just doesn't really cohere into something that is as memorable and as distinct and as unnerving as how I felt when I watched like Ex Machina.
Is the source material like that though, or not?
The source material is
Seems like it's a lot more science-y.
It's not more science-y, it's more it's they're very similar, so similar and very different in that one is the book is more about environmentalism and how, because we have changed our environment so much, it is now changing in ways that we could never have like conceived of or predicted. And now, after having control over the space for so long, it has now grown out of our control, and now we have to learn to ourselves adapt to the very like compounding, reverberating effects of what we have affected in our world. With this one, it's more of like an actual alien presence that is exerting itself and trying to sort of like bridge that divide of understanding, because for the shimmer and like the presence that's in there, like it's just doing what it does in the same way that a human being would do what it does when it goes into a space. It gathers food, it builds a house, and you put enough humans in one space, they end up making a city or something like that. The shimmer is only operating by what it is programmed to do, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really just trying to like elapse that sort of like alienness. It plays to the alienness, not so much the environmentalism, is what I'm saying.
That makes sense.
But yeah, I think that it's not a bad film. It's just not anywhere near. He should stick to original material. I'm just saying that, like Garland, you can write so well. You could probably write a film that is more in line with Annihilation without having to adapt Annihilation. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm just like read that and then read The Crystal World and read like all types of other like Anthropocene fiction. You could do this shit. Like I know he can. So my final honorable mention was right there, neck and neck with my sixth number. And it was a film that really polarized me, but by the end of that film, I did not want the film to end.
Vox Lux.
No. No. I resent you for making me go see that film with you, Alex.
Thank you.
Fuck you. Anyway,
Vox fucks you.
So, more like Vox fucks. So my last honorable mention is Suspiria. Ooh. I enjoyed Suspiria. That's not a popular opinion because I actually watched the original because Nick lent it to me.
Yeah.
And I watched it before we went to go see it in the theater. And I've been meaning to watch Suspiria for many, many years now. And what I can say is that if you put these two films stacked together, there's no contest. The original Dario Argento film just blows this one out of the water. I think so. I think that it is a consummately beautiful, interesting, like just figurehead for giallo horror film. Like by comparison, Luca, what's his name? Guadagnino's Suspiria could never be to film right now, in horror film right now, what Dario Argento's film was and is to giallo film in its time. There's just no way. But on its own, as its own sort of film, like at first I was bored, but I kind of like the sum of all these different parts, even if they are more obvious and more like blunt compared to the subtlety that is in Argento's original. Like I can't say that I don't fuss with it because I do, but I know that this is just like, I know this isn't orange juice, this is Sunny D, but I enjoy it for what it is. Know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. So finally getting to my top six. Sorry to belabor this so much, but
no.
You're good, buddy.
Suspense.
My number 6 is Ari Aster's Hereditary. I enjoyed Hereditary. And the reason why this was so neck and neck with Suspiria is that I feel like... Here's what I feel about Hereditary. I think that it's a puzzle box. It's a puzzle box of a film, and once you understand it, like there's nothing more that it is than what it is. It's like understanding that. So this matriarch of a home has basically entered into this pact with a demon, and has tried to basically offer up her family as sort of a compact to basically like live forever through her own coven. Right? She dies, and her resulting cruelty and her machinations end up bearing on the emotional health of her daughter, who is the head of her own family, and all of the things that she loses. The scene where Charlie dies is probably what tipped this over Suspiria, because as scary as the scene in Suspiria is with the glass mirror room, as beautiful and terrifying as that is, nothing made my chest sink than that extended long sequence, from the tension building up to her putting her head out the window, to Toni Collette just weeping, just sobbing from her gut and saying, "I want to die," on the floor of her bedroom, and then panning over to the son, who has to just overhear that. That is one of the most affecting scenes from any film, let alone a horror film. One of the most affecting sequences of any film I've had in this entire year. And after that, there's nothing in the film that really really matches that for sheer emotional heft and weight. At least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I know what Alex is going to say, which is me and him gravitate
dinner
towards
table
the
scene.
dinner scene.
Oh, that's true.
Where they have it out, which seems like the culmination of the
previous.
Yeah, and of the pent-up terror. After, obviously there's the initial shock
Right.
and whatnot, but after that, then it's a lot of repression going on.
Right. And then it explodes again.
Yeah. And so...
but that's the last peak, I think, in that film when it comes to the actual emotional duress, because then it just leans entirely into supernatural horror.
It does, yeah. So I agree that it can be kind of topsy-turvy in its weight and whatnot, but yeah.
Yeah. I think that it's a well-made film. I'm looking forward to seeing what Ari Aster produces next. Toni Collette is extraordinary, and the fact that she was snubbed fucking infuriates me to no end.
I agree.
Yeah. Who is next?
Me.
You.
Hello.
Me, you.
Yeah. So yeah, no, I just want to say I also love Hereditary. So my honorable mentions, I'll just kind of say what the 6 through 10 were for me. Number 10 was the movie that me and Alex just saw recently, which was Shoplifters.
Oh yeah.
The film by Hirokazu Koreeda. And I thought that was just a fantastic film, and it just perfectly measured in its pacing and how it doled out information. And even though, obviously, for me, and I think for a lot of people, the ending certainly makes the film and wraps it up to where you can see the complete package in a beautiful way.
The ending lets you make up your own mind about the characters in the film, which is very interesting, because that is... making up your own mind is a staple of the plot line of the film.
Yeah,
I would say so. It
you get to write your
really
own
works.
history, literally.
But boy, that is a slippery slope when you get into that, which is why someday I think we should definitely do an episode on that film, because I think it's warranted.
Absolutely. And what I was going to say is that even though the ending makes it, I also, for myself, was just loving the family drama that was ensuing up until that point, because it was so lived in and so real and whatnot. So,
Absolutely.
Number 9 is The House That Jack Built. The more I think about that film, the more I absolutely love it.
Yeah,
I just think Lars von Trier is unfortunately just one of my guys. And
I just really fucks what he's about, man.
pretty much.
You know what? He's a gentleman. Okay?
Oh my God, Alex!
He doesn't go after the easy target.
You take such perverse glee in that line. I have never seen you laugh harder at a film.
It was no robot in Rocky IV, but
Yeah.
there was something about it that tickled me. For
Yeah.
whatever
It was
reason.
good.
That was like shock laughter. Like, oh my God, I can't believe he just said that.
Yep.
It's great. Number 8 is a little film by one of my favorite directors currently working, is Andrew High, called Lean on Pete, which is it was a small film about a boy who's living in very troubled home life, but not like mean-spirited. It's not like he has like a drunk and abusive father. He just doesn't have a home life that is enough to support him, and then he
Conducive to his emotional health.
Yeah, and so he has to take drastic measures to cope and ultimately react to something tragic that comes out of it. And it's a gorgeous movie, cinematography-wise, and it ends up being so many things in so many ways, and some great tiny supporting performances from the likes of Steve Buscemi and Chloe Sevigny, that I genuinely think that's one of the most underseen films of the year that people really should have been talking about.
I had never even heard of it before now.
It's fantastic. Alex gave it to me for Christmas after I had been talking about it all year. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And then my last honorable mention I don't even really have to talk about because we just did was number 7, just off my list, was Suspiria.
Okay.
It's one of those where I'll admit that like it's not some kind of, new horror canon classic.
No, absolutely not.
But for me, when I was watching it from scene to scene, I personally was just getting more and more engrossed with it.
That's what I'm saying.
As it went on, which I feel like is actually the ultimate test of horror, because a lot of time, like we talked about Hereditary,
right.
Some of the dangers of horror is having your quote-unquote set pieces happen early on, and then the fear and the,
you become
reality.
too familiar to it.
Yes, whereas this never let the curtain truly come down until the final, or I should say penultimate sequence,
right.
when it was the right time. And I honestly, that final sequence in the room and whatnot, I still think is fantastic.
I think that the strobe light effect is a little... That's a little much. I
can see that. It's not so much that it was
gratuitous.
like the most original, the most whatever,
right.
But in a movie that directly needed to inject something into my veins,
right.
It finally did deliver on that.
I'm saying that in a scene where the specter of death is summoned by Mother Suspiriorum and like explodes the heads of like all of the disloyal loyalists of like this one witch who is trying to like pull the fast one over everybody, and basically another woman having her like guts like spilling out. I'm saying that a strobe light effect was too gratuitous for that scene. I'm just like, please tone it back. Just go back to a fucking filter, please. Yeah.
So my number 6 is a film that is probably going to get laughs, but personally, it's one that I've thought the most about, even if it has the least to say, because what it has to say is very obvious and blunt.
That's a sign of staying power, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's just I'm glad it doesn't try to punch outside of its weight.
Right.
And that is Unfriended Dark Web.
Okay.
It is the sequel that no one needed because the first one was actually not great. Like, I enjoyed it because I was just a sucker for the gimmick.
Right.
So that was the only reason why I went out of my way to see the second film. But the second film, this one, even with its stupid title, is an actual great horror film, in my opinion. It is something that is timely. It is using its terrifying backdrop of, yes, technology and the connectedness of the internet and privacies and whatnot, but it is turning it against its own characters. But I still come back to it because it actually uses its gimmick purposefully, respectfully, and accurately. Like, I'm not saying that when you watch the movie you'll be blown away that this could really happen, but it doesn't actually go out of its way, like a movie that also came out this year called Searching, which was awful in that respect. Like, I actually kind of like that movie, but that's a movie that had the same gimmick where you're watching everything from a computer screen and made no sense whatsoever. For example, and I know this is such a little detail, but like Unfriended Dark Web, when you look at something, it only does cuts. So like if we cut to something else on the screen, it will then cut to that, whereas Searching had to have everything do the Ken Burns effect, where it would just like, slowly pan over in case you were going to nod off, I guess.
Well, where it like zooms in on it?
So that way it tells you what to look at, whereas Unfriended does a pretty good job of world building in its background.
That's like the Jamaroque virtual insanity like music video where it pans down and then it goes back up again.
Yeah. One of the things I'll say about Unfriended Dark Web, and I actually did very much enjoy that film, even though I don't like it nearly as much as you do, Nick.
It's fine.
But the idea that the world in Unfriended Dark Web keeps being exposed as being larger and larger is a pretty well known, or not well known, but well done, because
pretty much parallel to that of the actual dark web.
Well, no, it starts off with people thinking that it's just like a horror film.
Yeah.
Just one guy.
Yeah, it's a cabal of random dorks who don't know what they're doing.
Right. And then it turns into this giant conglomerate almost.
Yeah, it's like walking down a bad neighborhood thinking you'll be fine because
Oh shit! It's the entire city.
But yes, and not only that, but that's also pretty much a view on the internet as a whole. When I post something to Twitter, all I think about are my followers are going to see this tweet, and half the time I don't even think that. Like I genuinely think that no one's actually going to see my tweet, even though I know that that is literally the social contract that I'm entering when I go onto that site. Let alone the fact that my profile is public, it can be retweeted at any moment, and whatever. So we have such a myopic view on our actions on the internet, and I think Unfriended Dark Web actually does eviscerates that notion.
Yeah.
And it does it with some wonderful payoffs to a lot of random stuff that you genuinely think is random. For example, the sign language computer program that the guy makes, the random new stereo that somebody bought. There are so many little moments that you think are just boring character details, I think, upon a first pass, that actually end up being, unfortunately, our downfall.
I really want Tucson to see it because, A, I think he'll enjoy it.
I do too.
And B, I really do want you to see the character who thinks that everyone is out to get him.
Yeah.
Just because I feel like he won't be able to make it through the whole film.
But one scene will be especially satisfying.
Yeah,
but
but early on in the film, when he starts on his rant about how Facebook and Twitter are free because you're the person and they're the consumer.
Oh, is that supposed to be the proxy for me?
No,
but just like all this shit that you hate.
All the shit that I hate. Yeah,
I guess I'm saying that I want to watch it with you and want you to see it because I feel like you're gonna give it a second to be like, okay, I'll listen. Then after 3 seconds, be like, nah.
But all the other characters do the same thing.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Whatever. So, yeah, I think Unfriended Dark Web is incredibly underrated. And if you have any passing interest, you don't even have to watch the first. It's not related, so just give it a shot.
I was literally, this is a small aside, but it ties into this. I was literally in a coffee shop a couple of days ago talking to a friend, an associate, and eventually the conversation moved to me literally just saying out loud in a very, very matter-of-fact voice. And I was like, no, fuck Elon Musk, fuck Jeff Bezos, fuck Mark Zuckerberg, fuck all those fucks. Bring back the estate tax, and also actually put in meaningful legislation because our antitrust laws are so woefully out of date that we now have Congress interviewing Zuckerberg and essentially just asking him to help them reset his phone. Fuck that.
Maybe he is that guy from Unfriended.
Oh my god. That's what I'm saying. I was just look, that's what I feel. Anyway, continue. Yeah.
Yeah, that's my number.
The congressional hearings with Mark Zuckerberg were not great.
Yeah. We really appreciate.
I liked it.
We really appreciate. You liked it.
Son of a bitch.
Fuck. Just
a Facebook joke.
Oh, okay. I get it now. Yeah. We really appreciated your story about how you founded your company in your dorm room.
The social network was really good.
Because you kept on repeating that you made it in your.
Did you see Aaron Sorkin wants to make a second one of those?
Dorm room. He's gonna go back to his dorm room and
So could you theoretically look up people's information? Yeah. I could.
God help. God help us all. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
No,
just you could theoretically launch nuclear bombs.
Yeah. So that was
next.
Next.
Number 6.
Next. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Pardon me. So, honorable mentions. I've got quite a few that I wanted to get to because I do think that even though the top definitely produced quite a few good films this year, there was a lot of films that were kind of stuck in that middle area. And so there are a bunch I want to mention. First, Tucson already mentioned it, but Revenge was absolutely fantastic. It's a film I would have never seen without Nick bringing it to the forefront, so I'm very glad he did, as I was a big fan. Another film that is not necessarily near my top 6, but is a film I really enjoyed and I'm looking forward to seeing again, is Overlord.
Yeah.
I thought that was a super underrated film that nobody saw. And
we went to go see it together, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah.
And I was just a huge fan, as I really liked the direction of the film. I loved just the pacing and the
super entertaining.
Yeah.
That's literally kind of few and far between these days.
Well, and I am just a huge sucker for
Occult World War II action films.
I was gonna say the idea of taking something that's real and turning it into science fiction is very entertaining.
They stole Hitler's brain.
Yeah, it's the same principle with, like, I'm reading the Hellboy comics again right now, and just like that's the same sort of through line. It's like, yeah, this was happening in World War II because it's actually like based in some measure of fact because the Nazis were fucking crazy and loved that occult shit. So what if that actually had some bearing on the actual war? Yeah. And I think that, like, Overlord really does take that and write it to the end. Like, I hope there's not an extended universe out of that film because it's just a really good one-off.
I don't know. J.J. Abrams produced it.
I know. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Remember when people thought it was going to be a Cloverfield movie?
I'm really glad it's not because those have gotten very much worse.
What was the
we should have took that as the first sign that it was going to be an actual decent movie when it was finally revealed that it wasn't going to be a Cloverfield.
God, I just remembered that film.
Yeah, that was right after the Super Bowl.
Fuck.
That might be coming up in our next episode.
Man, it might be. It might be. Damn.
But anyways, Overlord is a film that I actually probably will buy when it comes out because I did very much enjoy it. I thought it had fantastic sound editing. I thought a lot of the action sequences were fantastic. And the fact that somebody had a grenade blow up inside their mouth and then blow up other Nazis, it was just fantastic. A few others that I want to mention. Speaking of films that nobody saw, the film on Netflix directed by Paul Greengrass, 22 July, was a bit of a divisive film because there were people who had thoughts on it as not fans.
You talked about that on the Venom episode.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I still think quality-wise, Paul Greengrass does something that very few other directors aren't able to do, which he's able to captivate audiences and also create extreme tension in what I guess I would say are pretty like not there. He doesn't make blockbusters, but he makes films that feel like they're blockbusters wrapped into a small story. And 22 July gives you everything you could want out of this story while at the same time wrapping up all loose ends for the most part throughout. And also, too, it just lets the characters, for the most part, walk through and tell the story as it happens. So,
would you say that he makes, like, blockbuster thriller biopics?
I don't know. I think a lot of his
like, name off some films by him.
The Bourne films.
Captain Phillips, United 93.
Captain Phillips, United 93.
Yeah.
The first
Captain Phillips.
Those
United 93.
Yeah.
United 93.
Yeah, those films I think are of the ilk of, like,
that's his
this
recent trend.
And he did the first 3 Bourne films. Two.
No, wait, did he do the first? Or the first 2.
I love the first 2.
Gilroy
I do.
did the third.
Yeah.
Which is pretty much thought of as the best, right?
Which one?
The Bourne Ultimatum.
Maybe.
Oh, really?
I thought
I've actually never
second
seen
one
that.
was
I
supposed to
love
be
the first
considered
one.
best.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyways, those are the kind of films he's done. United 93 is, if you are looking for tension, that is a film that will fuck you up.
Mm-hmm.
But this film, 22 July, I really enjoyed, and it's a film that's accessible to anybody who has a Netflix account, so you should check it out. Really quickly, to a few more, because I have lots on my list, so sorry about that. But I liked quite a few films this year. Maybe it'll get brought up, maybe not. A Quiet Place, a horror film that horror films are usually not my bag.
Ooh, the nail scene. That
still can't do it.
Man, that.
However, that is a horror film that really does just hit all the right notes for me, and I was a huge fan of that. And I actually purchased that, or I got it as a Christmas gift from Kenny. But I own very few horror films, so that pretty much signifies that is just past the test.
It says a lot for me because I quite enjoyed it, didn't love it, but also really much enjoyed it because I love horror or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it says a lot that for as much as I didn't love it, that was the movie I watched on Halloween night this year. You know, like it was like the first thing I thought of and just instantly put on and watched it because it is just super solid horror that you can watch with anybody, because I even watched it with my mother, who hates horror.
Yeah. The creature design was cool. I liked it. The sort of the coccular implant and the organic coccular sort of like.
As somebody who wears hearing aids, I was very happy to find out that hearing aids are super powered.
But there you go.
We're the true heroes.
Yeah.
Hey, man.
Hey.
There you go.
What?
The film that definitely flew under the radar for most everybody and almost nobody saw it as well was the Joe Paterno film starring Al Pacino. Anybody should go see that because the whole story behind it is absolutely horrifying.
I was thinking that was going to be in your top 6, like right at the end, maybe.
It's on the it was on the
gonna
cusp.
say,
Yeah.
I knew.
That's what's hard, man.
My last honorable mention that I'm going to mention, we're on the cusp, and Paterno probably actually may have knocked its way in more than the other film, but at the same time, it was. First of all, the opening scene of that, if you are into sports at all and you knew the Joe Paterno sports story, but at the same time knew about how big of a deal the Jerry Sandusky story was, but also how big of a deal the breaking of that story was and it becoming public.
Alex, I don't know shit about sports. I know about that story. That's how big it was.
No, but the fact that it all came together at the same time
in the span of 48 hours.
Right, but the fact that Joe Paterno broke the record for most college wins the next day, basically Jerry Sandusky, it came out like under the radar, and then it basically exploded overnight. The opening scene, which is taking place during the game, where he's getting his 400 and whatever something win. And Jerry Sandusky is attending that game. The opening scene of that film is absolutely fantastic.
I'd agree with that.
And the rest of the film is honestly very, very, very good. And it actually gets a really good performance by Al Pacino.
Yeah.
Which
That's rare.
does not happen.
That's fucking rare.
Yeah.
She's got a great ass.
Can I say something as someone who's not a sports fan, especially football? Because that's just like the one sport I definitely don't care about.
What is the one sport you care about, if you were to say?
Hockey?
Hockey.
All right.
And then from a personal, as far as like a sport I actually like to play, if I'm ever going to play anything ever again in my life, it's tennis.
Okay. Yeah, fair.
'Cause I was going to say, the opening sequence is so good because it kind of is so objectively angled, which is not to say it doesn't have a agenda, so to speak, but as a non-sports fan, I was able to get enraptured by that scene because of the fact that I felt like you could literally watch this from so many different lenses, which is that, one, you could watch the dual nature of, the ascension of Paterno's legacy going up at the same moment that obviously it's about to go down, or you could watch it from kind of biased perspective like myself, where I was like,
the whole thing's about to crash and burn.
Yeah, where I was like,
And
oh,
yet we're
look
all
at
celebrating.
the roots of this college system is literally about to take fruit, and like this is like, because I just have a lot of feelings about professional football,
but
not professional, but college
just
professional.
in general. Yeah. College athletics, boy, you could talk about that.
Tell the truth.
The idea that the journalist, who I thought was played fine by Riley Keough, is like rooting for the team at the game while this is happening, while she's already kind of put this story together in the background. I mean, it's just hitting all the right
And
feels.
I just want to give a shout out that opening sequence is so great, and yet it also has like a split second to give a hilarious cutaway where they give you the flashback as to why Joe is up in the booth and not down on the field, where it shows that he was accidentally tackled during the practice because somebody went off the end.
But you see this old man just getting level.
It's great.
That's balancing like several different like moods, and that sounds really impressive. I actually would really like to watch that now.
It's good. It's a really good film.
Yeah.
And the rest of the film, the way it plays out, it is.
It's more boilerplate, but it's not.
But
bad.
it also, I think, looking back on it, if you watched it 10 years from now, you'd be like, wait a minute. So the students were upset not because they were harboring a child molester, but because they were firing the coach that enabled him?
Yeah.
No, it's because the way that I understand the story and way that
that's literally what they were upset about.
Oh, I thought it was like, it was like they're so like engrossed in like this this college football like hype cycle after just like all these things that just come to light, and it was like, no, man, it's like that couldn't be true. It was like that couldn't.
No. They were like, it doesn't matter that it is true. He did not rape kids, so therefore he did not do anything wrong.
Oh.
Yeah, it was despicable. So.
Yep.
Even when his son
Alpha
is going out there telling him, let's just think about the victim.
They start chanting his name at him.
Yeah.
Almost like a Fight Club kind of moment.
He's the only one person who's actually trying to, like, adhere to some
Robert
level,
Paulson.
But no.
Also, there were a lot of great quotes throughout film throughout the year, but that may have been my favorite in the middle of Paterno when they're wanting to think about hiring a PR person to try to like get them through this as a family, the Paterno family.
As a family.
And the mother says, "Doesn't the university have someone who can help us with this?" One of the other sons says, "Obviously they don't." That was great. And then my last honorable mention is, I'm sorry this has gone on a little bit longer than it should have, was right up my alley, and even though it probably could have been a better film, I still think it was fantastic and went under a lot of people's radar, and that was First Man. I actually thought both the performances in that film were fantastic. Ryan Gosling and Claire Foy. Actually, I thought Claire Foy was better, even though she wasn't given too much to do, which made sense for her character in the film. But I am a huge nerd for anything NASA space program related. Mm-hmm. And the fact that this film really did go for a Damien Chazelle mainstream film, spent a lot of time on technical details, even if they're dumbed down. I really appreciated that and enjoyed watching the entirety of the film. And the problem is, the best part of that film is the horrifying sequence that happens way before he goes to the moon, which actually they spend like 25 minutes on in the film.
Damn.
And it was, I thought, fantastic. But at the same time, I could see how that film rubbed people the wrong way. So, yeah. So, finally, talked about almost every other film I saw this year. But anyways, those were my honorable mentions. Mm-hmm. But for my top 6, I will also talk about Claire Foy again, who is a wonderful actress, and she was incredible in the Steven Soderbergh film Unsane. Boy, if you want to talk about a film that just goes after cultural gaslighting, that is what Unsane basically is in a nutshell. And even though that film, I think, really is what it is because of Claire Foy's amazing performance. The story is wonderful, but also Jay Farrow's character is also fascinating, as he is revealed. And I mean, it's kind of early, so I don't think it's that big of a reveal. Yeah, okay. Anyways,
I'm not saying you can't say it, but I do think it's relegated to the last half.
Okay, then I'll say this: he's not what he seems. However, that also gets double back on itself, and it is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
But in a era where mental illness is kind of a hot topic in films, which is good and also could be really bad.
It can be very manipulative.
Dude.
Yeah.
This is a film that I think is fantastic, as it takes its time to not only go after the flaws in the system, but also the people who abuse the flaws in the system. Mm-hmm. So I absolutely love this film. It was, I think, better than most of the other Steven Soderbergh offerings he's had since The Informant. And I will say I enjoy pretty much every single film he has, other than the one he did with Rooney Mara that I didn't really care for. But at the same time...
Side effects.
Yeah. At the same time...
That one gets better.
Okay. Uh-huh.
They all get better.
Sure. I love this, and I really do think more people do need to see it, because it is a film that has a lot to say, and also at the same time has wonderful performances, specifically by Claire Foy. So,
I agree.
Yeah. I know you.
That's all I have to say.
I know you're a Soderbergh disciple for the most part, so.
Yeah.
And that delightful cameo.
Yeah, Matt
by
Damon.
Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
Oh,
Who
man,
wants that texture in their mouth?
The way he slides his book across the table is so great. Because, to be honest, before that moment, he was trying to be like, or he was being professional. The way he was like just very coldly going down the list of what not to do, what to do. But he's like, here, this is a book I wrote. It'll teach you everything you need to know. And it just, oh man, that was a horribly laugh out loud moment in a very uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
So that was my number 6. Moving on to Toussaint with number 5.
Okay, so my number 5 is "They Shall Not Grow Old" by Peter Jackson. The
Look at you.
the documentary that he did
Nice.
for the centennial of the armistice. I actually was able to go see that in theaters the one day that it was in because
I went to go see it too.
yeah, my
I did not.
My friend Adam invited me on a whim like 2 days
I
before.
hate to interrupt. Did you stay for the
Yes,
for
I
the
did.
30-minute documentary
Yes, I did.
afterwards?
Yes, I did.
Good for you.
Yes, I did because it was extraordinary. I really, really love that documentary because I just it's more of a byproduct of just like navigating through the American compulsory education systems that I just don't know a lot about World War I, other than I understand like what were the animating circumstances, like Archduke Franz Ferdinand being assassinated by the Serbian terrorist group, the Black Hand, and because of the interconnected nature of all the alliances that were going on during the developing world at that time, like throughout the world, all these people just got like drawn into this dragnet sinkhole of a world conflict that would become the Great War because they didn't know there was going to be another one afterwards. So it was a Great War instead of just World War I. And seeing just these young men who like generationally they were just like drawn into it, and the way that Peter Jackson took this footage and updated it and colorized it and went to such exhaustive extent to provide Foley recordings to it. It's just such an absolute fucking labor of love. I've never seen anything that was quite like it.
The fact that he had lip readers come in so they could have the dialogue.
I know. It's so insane, like the level of detail that they
and the people with what they thought was the correct dialect
Yes.
for those people.
Yes.
Oh, dude.
Yes, and like the part when the one person was reading off of the list, and they were just like combing through all the archives to find what was that one list that he was reading,
and they found it
and approximating it. And I'm just like, fuck, this is so crazy.
How about? And I'm sorry.
No, let's bounce off.
I'm cutting you off.
We both love this. No, it's fine. Yeah.
What I actually really liked the documentary after it.
Yes.
About the making of it more.
That's essential, in my opinion.
Because the fact that it all looks the same, how horrible of a shape a lot of that film is in, and the fact that they got it to look the way it did is absolutely incredible.
Right. And especially with like the colorization of grass, like that was really fascinating.
They called Paul Greengrass for that one.
The sound effects too.
Sound effects were great,
and the fact that a lot of like the cannon sounds actually came. That was kind of weird because it's really clear that not Paul Greengrass,
Peter Jackson.
Peter Jackson is a World War I aficionado.
Oh yeah, because he dedicated to his great grandfather.
He did, but at the same time, they're like, "Well, where'd you find the cannon to shoot for that?" I owned one already. It's just
I mean
that's kind of like a Guillermo del Toro thing.
Yeah,
like,
he's
I have this in my closet.
Like Guillermo has Guillermo has Bleak House, and Peter Jackson has his fucking like Field of Tanks.
Yeah.
The other thing that's fascinating to me about that film is that the group came to him, said, "Here's all this footage and here's all this audio. We don't care what you do with this. Just make a film about this."
Right, and like.
How do you
start? How do
you do that?
And he talked about all the different stories you could have done. I'm just like, God damn, that's so incredible. But yeah, this film is extraordinary. If you ever get the chance to see it in theaters, I definitely recommend it. And even still, like, watch it because it's just so. Oh my God, I had such an in-depth conversation with my friends afterwards because it's just like how defeated and how exhausted the young men were when the war was finally called off. And it's like there was no great hip hurrah. It was just like, fuck, I've been through hell. I just want to go home. And like coming back and like feeling like they weren't appreciated for what they did and how people just didn't want to talk about that anymore. I'm just like, same as it fucking ever was. Like, that is just like time is a fucking flat circle. This shit just keeps on happening. Yeah, so yeah, that was my number 5. They Shall Not Grow Old. It was incredible.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
My number 5 is a film from the filmmaker Andrew Bajolski, which is called Support the Girls.
Oh.
This was a film that centered around a dining establishment / bar that is heavily reminiscent of a franchise like Hooters.
Okay.
In which it is obviously there to serve subpar bar food that everyone raves about. But
That's not why people go.
But actually is for the very well-picked hiring staff of girls parading around in whatever outfit and whatnot. But this movie is so human in its character strokes. It centers around Regina Hall, who is clearly the kind of de facto manager, even though there's actually a kind of head manager above her who doesn't show up to the actual location.
Is that manager a man?
Yes, of course. And but she's the one who's actually running things on the floor and what. Yeah. And so it's just so gorgeous because the movie doesn't shy away from like what this kind of culture would be like, because in a lot of ways it's enabling some of the worst habits in just customer to service employee relations, because yes, you are selling that kind of leering and kind of flirting, because they do kind of say like, yeah, you are here to kind of do that, and yet she is the mother hen to all of these girls who work for the establishment, because she will not let any of them be mistreated or feel uncomfortable in anything that happens to occur in the restaurant. And it's got a great ensemble cast. Below her, it's got Haley Lou Richardson from, like The Edge of 17 and Split.
Yep.
And the girl from The First Girl I Loved. The main girl from that.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh.
She plays the new girl who's hired that day, and she
Really?
plays very heavily in the kind of climax. And it's very hard to say that this film has a climax, because it is very much what a lot of people would call mumblecore, and in my opinion, fuck that classification.
Is it meant to be pejorative? Is it meant to be like...
It is when people say it. So it might, it's just drama, just because you may not like shaky cam and,
I like shoegaze. Like, that's...
And improvised line reading,
Right,
that kind of thing. It's a texture, and if you don't like it, that's fine. But I feel like mumblecore makes it sound like there's no actual lines. It's like, no, it's a choice. It's not a, yeah.
So, it's a texture, and some people like that texture in their mouth.
That is true.
Yeah.
But this movie is fantastic. It shows the camaraderie of all these women who are working together, who are both suffering from the same kind of day-to-day work things, but also are from completely different walks of life outside the restaurant. So it's such an eclectic band of characters, and you grow to care about every single one of them. And the whole movie takes place, of course, all in one day. It's from the opening of the restaurant to the closing that night. And a lot happens in this day. Some quiet moments that obviously mean nothing in the grand scheme of things. Some not so quiet moments that change some of their lives forever. But that's not to say that this is a big movie in any way, but it shows that real life, the big moments are never as showy as, they are in the movies.
Do all their lives crash?
No. But that the littlest action can be kind of taken as something else. And it's fantastic. Regina Hall gives easily one of the best performances of the year. She has so many things she has to do in this movie as an actress.
She was nominated for an Oscar for If Beale Street Could Talk? Or is that a different actress?
That's a different
I'm
actress.
so sorry.
No, it's okay. Regina Hall. Wait, is it Regina Hall? I know this is Regina Hall. You're thinking of somebody else, though, and I forget her name, sadly.
Sorry about
No.
that. I got them mixed up.
Now it's
Regina King is who I'm thinking of. Yep.
Yeah. Regina Hall, that's why it's kind of so surprising. She was best known for being Brenda in the Scary Movies. Like,
okay.
Just like from a flashback as to, what she started out as, to this, where she's giving one of the most gorgeously realized and down-to-earth performances of anything I've ever seen. So she deserves total props for her role in this. And I think anybody, because considering it's a short movie and whatever, I feel like there's something for everybody here. And one thing I love that it nails is that obviously I don't work at a bar or in the food service industry, but I do work at a public desk, which means I do start to have a rapport with patrons that come into the library and whatnot. And this totally gets at the feeling of having returning customers and the back and forth nature of that, which is that, like, one day I could be very annoyed at the same person who comes in, and the next day I'm glad that they're here because they're tethering me to some sort of normalcy routine that makes me feel comfortable.
Right.
And it just depends on what day they catch me on. And this obviously has that with a few characters who frequent this establishment regularly. And so it's a fantastic movie, and a lot more people should actually see it.
Very good.
That was my number 5. Support the girls.
Nice.
Support them.
Support them.
Thank you for being very clear on that.
Like, share, and subscribe.
My number 5 for 2018 is Avengers Infinity War. I love superhero films, so this is not that big of a surprise that this cracked into my top 6. That being said, the storyline throughout this film actually is not the best part of the film.
More like Infinity Bore.
Oh.
I actually don't think that. I just really wanted to make that pun.
Okay, great. Specifically the ending, which is, people talk about, and there are a lot of people who are apparently emotional over it, and yet I have always viewed it as being silly.
They needed counseling at Comic-Con.
Yeah,
Why'd you have to bring that up?
That's got to be one of the worst.
Let's talk about that on the Endgame episode.
Oh, we will.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
We're gonna check in on them to see if they're okay.
Yeah, performative faux grief. I like that. That's great. Yeah.
So, getting away from all that silliness, two things that made this film absolutely stand out to me were the fact that they were able to have all of these characters in the same film, and it never, to me, felt overstuffed to the point where I was annoyed. Because even though there are a lot of characters, and they are certainly sharing the screen and having to be on the same screen as other big characters from other bigger properties or similar-sized properties, it all just kind of flowed well together, which I was super happy about because that was the thing I was probably most concerned about this film. And the second thing, which is much more important to me, is that the action here is pretty much second to none, as the pacing and also the look of it was such a huge improvement over the sort of high-speed action that we've seen in previous films like Civil War and Winter Soldier and The Last Thor to a lesser extent. Like, the idea of getting away from this sort of cartoonish, somewhat unwatchable action was really awesome that they finally made it feel real to me. And I absolutely loved Infinity War. I thought it was a really good year for Marvel. I mean, this and Black Panther, obviously, and then Ant-Man the Wasp were all, for the most part, solid. Yeah. So I was a big fan, and I am obviously looking forward to Endgame. But at the same time, I thought Infinity War actually delivered on its promise, and I am super happy it did.
What about Captain Marvel or Spider-Man Far From Home?
Let me just say one thing.
Oh, boy.
Our Captain Marvel episode is going to be fucking weird.
Because you know way more about that now than I do.
I have read the original Miss Marvel run, 2 of the Kelly Sue DeConnick runs. I've read the random Captain Marvel, who was Captain Marvel, the female before Carol Danvers, which was Monica Rambeau. I've read the actual Captain Marvel's first few issues, including the issue in which the origin story for Carol was born out of, and a lot of stuff, including the Kree Skrull War from the Avengers run.
This is fascinating.
Just
because it's like
to see what plays out in this movie.
It's like
None of it will.
It's like listen.
No, actually, that's kind of what I've been. Like, I've been going on IMDb,
right,
seeing who's playing who,
Okay.
looking up their runs. Going,
It's
okay, I'll
like
read that
listening
now,
to
just see how
myself
it
trying to
gets
like
portrayed.
talk to somebody about a thing that I'm really passionate about and they don't know shit about it, and I'm like, wow, this is what it's like on the other end of that conversation, but I'm still really interested.
It's gonna get fucking weird.
It's gonna get weird, yeah.
That's probably one of the films I'm most looking forward to.
Ooh wee,
I
it's
am
gonna
too.
get weird.
I will admit, part of we'll wrap this up, obviously, but I only kind of went with this because I actually really started to enjoy the Miss Marvel character. Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't have continued if I was like, oh, well, this is fucking stupid.
Yeah.
So.
And the fact that Brie Larson was picked up, and this is really her first like really major role since Room.
I mean, her biggest role for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was in that movie with Woody Harrelson called The Glass House.
Yeah.
Anyways, Infinity War was my number 5. Moving on to Toussaint and number 4.
Okay, so my number 4 is going to be the only superhero film that is included on my list for this year, and it is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Wow.
My number 4 is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Even though I, just to be totally transparent, I gave They Shall Not Grow Old a 5 out of 5, which if you know me, you know how rare that is, how significant that is. And I gave, I think I gave Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse like a comparative 4, maybe like a 3.5, maybe 4, somewhere around that. It's like I just have to put it over that one simply because I've already expressed my fatigue with superhero films as of late, like in previous episodes. And so I am more cautious to really like heap praise or hyperbole onto those films. I liked Black Panther. I can't remember like what my comments were on for the episode that we did for it, but I know that it is not on my list. If it were not for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, I'm not even sure if it would have broken into that one spot there. But so when I say with as much caution as possible that I believe that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is probably not only one of the best animated films of the year, it is probably also one of, if not the best Spider-Man films I've ever seen. Like I'm being really fucking serious because I've never seen something that looks quite like this as an animated film. It does things with its cinematography and with its animation and even with its music in such a way that I feel like it totally leans into the comic affordances of the source material while translating it organically into cinema. It really does just like lean heavily into this maximalist pop art, like hallucinogenic aesthetic, and it never feels grating and it never hurts so much on the eyes. And even like towards the end, like it almost like devolves and explodes into this like Akira-esque maximalism where I'm just like, holy fucking shit, like where are you going after this? Because like it's they really did throw everything at the board, and yeah, I love that film. So Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, that's my endorsement. Number 4.
Nice.
I endorse it as well.
Yeah.
My number 4 is a film we've talked about called Unsane by Steven Soderbergh.
Unsane in the Membrane.
Unsane, got no brain. I'm a huge fan of Steven Soderbergh. Should be no surprise here.
Everybody really should be.
Yeah. And this is easily one of his best films in quite some time, which is crazy because...
Crazy!
Because it was born out of one of his most seemingly carefree gimmicks, which is, I'm going to shoot a crazy kind of Hitchcock thriller on an iPhone. And that's what this is. It's not like he was misleading, like, well, really, we shot that one scene, and then we got an actual rig up, or whatever. Like, no, this is his brain as a filmmaker distilled into these gorgeous high-angle shots, desk-level shots, and so on and so forth. And the weird texture of the digital resolution here is just so wonderful, and it kind of makes you doubt what you're seeing, and yet also looks like it's security footage, which fits right at home in a...
The overlay scene between her and the guy is fucked up.
Yeah, and that's the only kind of thing that can only happen when you experiment with this kind of thing, and that's the kind of fun that I like to see Stevie having with the medium. And yet, putting that all aside, it's a fantastic lead performance that's anchoring the entire thing. It's a amazing script, and I don't mean amazing in the sense that like it should be studied, but just that it doesn't settle for less. Like this script clips at a breakneck pace and yet has a lot to say about a lot of things. Maybe sometimes too many things, but I don't really care because it goes by so breezily that I don't have to stew in what is half-hearted and what isn't. It just totally packs a punch as a film, and it is such a wonderfully timed film, and it's crazy how it becomes both a horror story of anybody who suffers with mental illness's worst nightmare, which is that A, you're not believed, or B, that your fate is worse than what you thought if you just reach out for help. And like, that's terrifying.
And also, too, the fact that even though she is put there against her own consent, the fact that she starts to almost, as soon as she's put in there, completely look down upon the other people who are there.
Absolutely.
As saying that, no, they're actually crazy people. I'm just here against my will, and it's just like, damn.
Yeah, no, and it's terrifying, and it's fantastic. There's literally nothing I probably haven't already said on our episode that we did on it, so listen to that, because we did one. And also, obviously, Alex was a big fan, so that's 2 people already. I think that's the first film on at least more than one list so far.
Yeah.
So that's I think pretty good sign for Unsane.
Absolutely. It's a very well-made film, and I think interesting for Soderbergh because I feel like, and I said this on our episode, I like the other brand of films he makes more that are in line with something like the Ocean's film or The Informant or even the film he came out with last year.
Well, I was going to say, by the way, I was going to bring that up and say, besides Logan Lucky, this is my favorite film of his since The Informant, but I actually slightly prefer Logan Lucky. But that's just me.
These kind of films, or I did mention Side Effects, are not like the kind of films I like of his. But this one just totally won me over. It was fantastic.
Absolutely.
And that scene in the padded room, where she basically leads someone else to slaughter, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That is fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Powerfully so.
Oh, yeah.
So that's my number 4.
Excellent.
Unsane.
My number 4 is a film that I actually think could have easily been my number 1, and that's how close my 1 through 4 is.
Yeah.
Not that it's super close, but it's right there. My number 4 is Black Klansman by Spike Lee. I was a huge fan of this.
Okay.
I don't know if I like it more than Do the Right Thing, which is my favorite Spike Lee film.
Yeah.
And I also love the 25th Hour. And
25th Hour is probably my favorite.
And Inside Man.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of films that are up there for me. But this was, I would say, a little outside of Spike Lee's comfort zone, I would say. As this is a film that is definitely tackling racism and is also at the same time going after the police in a way, but also, too, it's trying to find a common ground between people who are racist and people who are trying to be better and bridging that gap in a way. As this film turns into a weird buddy cop film between John David Washington and did I say his name wrong? Oh, fuck. That's his name?
Yeah.
I thought I said it the wrong middle name. And Adam Driver I feel bad because he's a white person, but I thought Adam Driver actually gave the best performance in this film.
Okay. I think he gave a pretty good performance in his own right. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, the idea of them having to be one in the same because of this put on this caricature that was created, which is still the same person that is fascinating. And that's what's great about this is that just like with Overlord, this is a film that definitely is going for historical fiction. It is a film that is taking off of things that Quentin Tarantino has done many times. And it is pretty much the last 20 minutes or so of this are completely fictional, but it's basically saying, fuck the racists.
Yeah, it's very...
Let's have them blow up in a car accident and I'll tell David
yeah,
Duke he's a big piece of shit.
The car explosion definitely feels like a contrivance. Like, whether it actually happened or not, like the way that it was actually placed in the film feels as though these events are being conformed into the shape of a 3-act film. Like, this is not how the story actually happened, but like it makes for a serviceable film. I think
no one wants to sit down and watch a movie where it plays out the way it does, and then that doesn't happen in the third act. And I don't say that because people don't want to watch serious movies. We do. But if we wanted to watch the real story, probably would have just researced it or read the book written by the Ron Stallworth, which is, I think, also valid. Like,
yeah. But one of my favorite moments of the year is also another thing that was completely fabricated for this film, which is when Ron Stallworth ends his final conversation with David Duke, kind of reading back all of the racist shit that he called black people over time, which is like one of the biggest fuck you moments ever, which was just fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And again, totally not
How does
real.
it feel to have said all that stuff to a black man?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, too, from start to finish, and especially I thought this on the rewatch, this film is captivating to me from the opening scene until the closing aspect, which is just showing the Charlottesville stuff edited together. Even though that is probably one of the weaker parts of the film, I've kind of come to terms with it, kind of having a place in this, especially if you're watching this down the road. That being said, the scene that opens this film, basically, I mean, there's other things that are before it, but the scene where he's sent to the rally he got a promotion to be undercover, but then he's sent to be undercover to make sure black people aren't saying anything that bad, is fucked up.
And he complies with it.
Does.
Not saying that he's okay with it.
I mean, are you talking about at the beginning when he has to like infiltrate?
He goes see Stokely Carmichael.
Yeah, like that I think, chewing back to something we talked about earlier with like Sorry to Bother You, I feel like that is the main like sort of like point of contention that like Boots Riley is like honing in on. It's like that's the wound right there. That's what it is.
I think it's that, but also reading Boots Riley's thing, because I actually do want to bring that up one last time.
Yeah.
Is that he also takes umbrage with the fact that the cops in this movie, some of them are portrayed very favorably. And I don't think that that's entirely true. And what I like about Black Klansman, which should have been one of my honorable mentions because it was pretty much right up there, is that for me, this whole movie comes down to the one scene in which Ron Stallworth is talking to the Adam Driver character. And it's such a simple line, but when he says, "Why are you acting like you don't have skin in the game?" And I feel like that's what this movie is kind of trying to preach, which is telling white people that as much as we would love to think that, just a cry for peace would be enough, it's never going to be.
No.
But removing that, why are we still thinking that we are somehow untouchable if we allow these kind of systems to be put into place and become normal?
Whiteness is an inclusive invention, and it only continues to be inclusive when there isn't an outside minority to sort of like aim that animus towards, and when that minority is not there anymore, then that that sort of inclusive descriptor of whiteness becomes more striated and becomes more.
There will be a hierarchy.
Hierarchical
Yes.
as it goes on. It's like it's like then we're going to move backwards in time when. Hopefully, hope to God it never happens like that. But then you'd move backwards in time to when like the Irish were vilified, and nobody wants that shit anymore, man.
And that's why I loved Driver's then kind of moment in that movie where he said, he's like, I've never had to think about this until now, and now it's all I could think about.
Yep.
And it's just that kind of an eye-opening moment because that's kind of what it's going to take as a nation.
That's kind of
that's
kind of white privilege, like in a nutshell.
It's not going to be easy, and it may never happen.
Right.
But that is the kind of awakening that needs to happen on a collective level, not a
Right.
majority or not a totality level, because there's always going to be people that are never going to see that.
Right.
But if more people would realize that we do not suffer the same things, but we're all in the same goddamn boat, and if there are less people in this boat, then all that shit's going to roll onto you as well.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway.
And the fact that it does basically early on in his attempting to get into the Ku Klux Klan, when, as he calls it, trying to give
The
me
interrogation.
a Jew detector test, is let's get a look at that dick.
Yeah.
Boy, that is really something.
Yeah.
The over-the-top nature, too, of the racist, I think actually is perfectly put in here because, boy, I don't know if that's necessarily lying.
No, and to be fair, there's actually a nice, in my opinion, variety of racists here. The guy who plays the kind of the head of the chapter
The
is
guy who's
actually
on that new television show, right?
What show?
It's not Manifest. He's a doctor on some.
He's
show.
on that. He was one of the guys on Blacklist, and then he had like a Blacklist like spinoff.
Anyway,
I thought he was fantastic because he looks like the guy who would totally blend in on a Sunday church, mass. Like
no, he seemed like he. No, if you were actually thinking about who the head of, and this is fucked up to think about this, but if you actually think about people who should be head of the Ku Klux Klan, it should be somebody like that.
Yes.
Who could attempt to not make it seem like they're just crazy cross-burning fucks who are out trying to talk about how much.
But
they
actually
black
have this
people.
sort of like this almost chameleon sociopathic nature about them.
The more horrifying
to
aspect.
be able to blend into like otherwise polite conversation and actually assimilate people.
It's really easy to spot the crazy racist who just wants to kill black people.
Right.
It's harder to spot people like David Duke who are trying to be senators wearing suits and ties. And
Right. Yeah.
Who will refuse to say certain things. Like,
Yeah.
literally change their entire rhetoric to hide their beliefs because apparently they know that it's wrong and yet they also fully believe in it enough to fight for it.
They know that it's wrong, but they think that they will reach more people if they look more professional.
Yeah. They use dog whistles.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Also, too, that performance by Eric Fortman was just absolutely fantastic, mostly because he seems like he's kind of playing himself, which is really scary.
He was really fucking depressed. Like
Topher Grace?
Yeah,
No,
Topher Grace ended up editing all
I
of
was
the
gonna say, it
all
seems like
the
this-
fucking
No,
Hobbit
he's
films together.
He's not playing himself, but I feel like watching that's almost like Eric Fortman playing that character. Like it's
He's not stretching
No.
to
No.
become
No,
something.
it seems like it's Topher Grace.
He's not doing an
that
impression.
character. No,
he's just
not.
being a David Duke.
Yes,
which is creepy.
Which is creepy because now you've got all these racist hate rhetoric being read by a guy who I'm like, oh no. So yeah, but that's a very, very well put together film. Spike Lee did a really nice job with it, and also too Jordan Peele, who kind of goes under the radar, but he was heavily involved in this film as a producer, kind of behind the scenes. This is a really, really solid film, and a film that I think people should see, and a cause that obviously more people should be interested in.
Yeah.
Because it's... And the last thing I'll say is that the scene that is ham-fisted and obviously a little over the top, but the scene where you have the dueling black power, white power being shouted in different rooms is very interesting because of the stark nature of it, is that there's these people who are trying to get out of this disgusting, despicable cellar that they've been driven into as sort of a less than regular citizen. And then you have the other opposite, which is hateful people who have no care in the world about other people and just want their group to be number one.
And they're watching America's first blockbuster, which is The Birth of a Nation, which is the story of the founding of the Ku Klux Klan. Yeah.
And the cheering that happened. Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's an effective film and one that I think I'll be watching for many years to come.
Yep. So number 3.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so number 3 is for me Barry Jenkins' If Beale Street Could Talk. I actually watched this just this past weekend. I really enjoy this film. It's interesting because James Baldwin is sort of going through a moment in vogue right now where his writing and his appearances, his image is sort of like becoming sort of like a centerpiece, not just as a black writer who is like profoundly articulate, but also as a gay black writer who was already sort of like marginalized within a marginalized like community. And a lot of the things that he talked about like back in the 60s and the 70s, like that's stuff that has never been reconciled with and has never been really born with. And it's like just to be able to like look to that person and see that writing and see how much it reverberates and resonates. Like just to step aside for just one moment, like during the 2016 summer, like when all those police shootings were going on and stuff, like I remember like going to the park and just reading The Fire Next Time like in one sitting, and it was a really powerful experience. For this film, however, this is based on a novel that he wrote, like I think in the mid-1970s, I think, towards like the end of his life. It was beautiful. I love this film. I think that it is one of the best shot films of the year. I think that is one of the best acted films of the year. The guy who was in Widows and in Atlanta, what's his name?
Brian Tyree Henry.
Brian Tyree Henry. He was exquisite in this film. I thought he did a really great job. And I think that if there's one criticism I do have of this film, it's that I feel like it for me, my same criticism of Alex Garland in Annihilation is the same thing that I feel towards Barry Jenkins towards adapting this material. I think that this is a good adaptation. I think that I am more interested in watching original material from this director. I'm not saying that he could maybe write anything close to the level of James Baldwin, but I'm saying that I really, as much as I love this film, I loved Moonlight, and I want to see more original material from him and his voice. And if he had to go through making this film in order to move on, in order to like sort of pay nod to his forebears and his influences, then I'm happy with that because it was a great film. But I'm looking forward to where he goes next.
Right on.
Yeah, beautiful score too.
That was my biggest miss of the year. It only came to our theaters like 2 weeks ago, and I just did not get a chance to watch it. Yeah. My number 3 is a film that went to Netflix.
Oh, boy.
Oh, the day is here.
Oh, the day is here.
I can't believe it. But it is the Coen Brothers, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
I haven't seen that yet.
Oh, well, let me tell you about it.
Well, let me sit you down there, partner.
This is an anthology Western vignette of 4 short stories from the Coen Brothers, and all 4 of them are just Coen-esque to a T, and yet all kind of have a different shade of them. There's one that's from, I would say, their kind of Raising Arizona era, where it's slapstick comedy, and it's lunatic. Literally, people have called it Chuck Jones-esque. You know, it's very Looney Tunes, and the violence is gleeful, and yet it somehow is bookended by musical numbers that are delightfully glib and silly. Kind of reminds me of what they did with the character from Hail Caesar in his moments where you see the movie that he's working on.
Oh, okay.
I forget who played Han Solo, but
Alden.
yes, Ehrenreich.
Yeah.
Yes, what they were parodying there. At least the first short story is like a little mini version of that, and it's delightful.
Which one of them has the dual trains with them doing the splits? Because that's the only shot that I've seen that I've been like, oh shit.
The dual train.
Yeah, there's unless it's from a different movie that I'm
trying to think.
It's from the Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
So wait,
isn't it?
what do you mean the train?
Like there's two trains going in the same direction. There's a guy sitting on it with doing the splits, basically being held by both. Is that a different movie?
Talking about Paddington 2?
That's from Paddington 2?
Where Hugh Bonneville, because he's been taking yoga, is able to relax and split his...
Really? That's from that? Okay.
I think it is. No, you leave that in there.
No?
You leave that in there.
God damn
it's a 2018 movie.
Fuck.
That is eligible.
It is,
yes,
but
that is Paddington 2.
It is.
You're so right
it's the
now.
whole thing, because remember Hugh Grant's character is being chased through the trains? And
I honestly forgot about that and thought that was from the Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
No.
So I was wrong.
That's amazing, though.
That's prestige filmmaking right there.
I'm going to have to wear it. Damn it.
So yeah, the four stories though are fan-fucking-tastic. Hugh Bonneville is in neither in none of them. But let's just see here. I'm going to go down the line and say the first story is fantastic. That was the one I was talking about, it being kind of slapsticky and whatnot. The second story is the weakest one. It's the one that stars James Franco, who's also like good in it. But it's the one that's most.
Spring Break.
Yeah, it's the one that's most centered around just trying to set up a funny punchline. I mean, it's just one of those, and it's good though. It's the third. Oh no, there's 5 stories. I always forget about that. The third and the fourth and the fifth are the more serious. Oh wait, there's 6 stories.
I don't feel as bad now, at least. Still pretty bad, but not as bad.
I just kind of forget how much goodness is in this film because they do not try to connect them in any meaningful way, which I feel like is refreshing because it's almost unheard. Even the Black Mirror has its own universe, and it's fucking stupid. Anyway, but all these stories range from incredibly sad, which is the Liam Neeson story, which is easily maybe the most depressing thing the Coen brothers has ever made.
Huh.
It is just 25 to 30 minutes of pure misery capped by an ending that throws misery off a cliff. Wow. It is just hilariously misery-laden. Then I would say the Tom Waits story is a almost wordless story in which Tom Waits plays a desperate prospector just looking for gold, and you would think that would be rote and just kind of nothing, but Tom Waits gives it his all, and it's got a very fun arc to it. And the final 2 stories are, I think, kind of the standout in just like giving you something to chew on, and actually could have been maybe fleshed out to a whole feature just because they're so rich.
Right.
But I'm kind of glad that they weren't. Which is the 5th story centers around a woman who is kind of traveling with a wagon, whatever you call it. Caravan. I was thinking other random CA words. Right. A wagon caravan just trying to get where she's going, but slowly but surely her journey, it just gets harder and harder. Not to the typical Western thing, like sickness or whatever, but because she almost subtly keeps losing pieces of herself, whether it's one of her passengers that's with her or a dog that she was not overly fond of, but also felt comfort in its barking that kept her up, and little things like that get slowly chiseled away to the point of the ending of that story, which I won't even spoil, but ends with her kind of making a choice as to whether to continue or not in a very uncomfortable context. And the final story is a bit on the surreal side, and it's just fantastic, where it takes a very...
Is this the titular Buster Scruggs?
No, Buster is in the first one.
Okay.
It's just Tim Blake Nelson going around shooting people and singing ditties. Like, that's literally... That's actually the whole point of that story, and it's fantastic. No, the final story is just a 4 or 5 people or whatever in a stagecoach for the whole thing, and I figured it out very early on, but this isn't a spoiler because it's not that kind of movie, but they're basically in clearly what's a purgatory-like place, and that stagecoach is like the river,
Styx.
Yes, where they are being taken to their ultimate destination. None of them remember how they got there, and it's just gorgeously realized. There's a lot of fun people in that stagecoach, like Brendan Gleeson and whatnot. But all these stories taken together just fucking flew by. I mean, it's like a 2-hour film, but no story overstays its welcome, and each story has its own single purpose that, if you, like, I could watch this if it came out on Blu-ray, and I would kind of hope, I mean, it's what chapter selection is for, but I could also see a mode where you just, like, click play and then it'll just say which story you want to watch, because that's just how good these individual stories are. So I think,
wouldn't it be cooler if you could actually interact with them? Bandersnatch.
Cohen Snatch.
The Ballad of Bandersnatch.
Cohen Snatch. So yeah, that's the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, and it's just an adorable film. I really think that there's something for everybody in here if you've liked at least one Cohen film. I mean, obviously the Coens aren't for everybody, but there are different versions of the Coen that at least most people respond to one of them, and they're all here. So the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, number 3.
Good stuff. So to take off of something that Toussaint did a little bit earlier, I actually have a film that is ranked higher than my top 2. Not ranked, but I rate higher than my top 2. So I actually give the film that is number 3 on my list a 5-star rating.
Okay.
It's the only film I gave 5 stars to in 2018. And it's number 3 on my list.
But it's not your favorite. Yeah.
It's not my favorite, though. And I kind of had an internal turmoil with that, but I decided just to rip it off like a Band-Aid.
Right,
Go
yeah,
with this.
yeah.
It's my list, so I can do whatever the fuck I want.
Right.
So,
it's perfect for the film that it is, but it's not the consummate sort of like standard that you would.
Sure.
Yeah.
The other 2 did more that I enjoyed more. So they were number 1 and number 2.
Exactly.
But number 3 is Alfonso Cuarón's Roma.
Okay.
Which was, I thought, a masterpiece. And even though it's not my favorite kind of content, the thing that makes this film such a win for me is this is not my kind of movie in the slightest. This is very much a mundane slice of life, start to finish year in the life of a family in Mexico in the 1960s. And it is just, from start to finish, absolutely wonderful. Incredible cinematography, wonderful lighting that I think could have been a little bit better, but still very good. The way the streets look throughout feels like it actually is authentic, even though that's been something that people have kind of given Cuarón shit for, which I feel like is a little weird because he made this.
Is that really the point?
Yeah. But at the same time, the storyline here is fascinating to me. The way the characters move from start to finish is wonderful. And then you bring all of that in with the fact that this falls into the space that we are in as Americans, and whether or not we agree with it, which most people and all the people in this room do not, with what's happening with
Speak for yourself.
Sure thing.
Toussaint has strong opinions.
Oh, God.
They need to be valued.
I was going to say something, but I don't even want that clip out in the universe.
Damn it. I'm trying to bait you.
Yep.
But everything about this, just in the fact that you have a completely alternate culture from the one that I've ever lived in, and yet the loving and also excruciating parts of everyday life within a small family section of that culture is completely fascinating to me. And the fact that start to finish, the looks on people's faces, the decisions that characters make, and just the little details throughout, I thought were just placed so perfectly by Cuarón, who is not necessarily a director who I've always thought of as being someone who nails the little details. But here I thought he honed his craft pretty much perfectly. And also, too, this film has some uncomfortable moments towards the end of it. And one last thing I will say about Roma is I think the film speaks for itself, and it's on Netflix, so I think everybody should see it.
Both of our number 3s
are on Netflix.
Netflix Productions.
And oh God,
Welcome to the future.
Yeah,
sadly,
I will say this was a very interesting experience for me. Roma was, because I don't know if I ever have, and I don't know what the future will bring, but being able to watch this by myself for the first time, and then to see it for the second time in a theater in its first run with a lot of people who clearly had not seen it before was a very unusual experience for me.
Yeah, it never usually happens in that kind of order.
No. And I think
that's going to become the new. That might become.
I don't know if it will, because I don't know. Like, first of all, getting to see Roma in the theater is kind of a lucky specialty type thing, because it's not.
It's not actually going to theaters.
No.
It's only going to engagements, which is, in this case, we got to see it on 70 millimeter at the Music Box Theater,
Which was wonderful.
Yep.
We also saw
Shoplifters, which I mentioned earlier.
Yep. But this film, Alfonso Cuarón has done a wonderful job with this and created this very interesting look at a family and a culture in this specific time period. And it's something that people should watch and I think embrace the idea of what this film is trying to say. Yeah. So Roma was my number 3.
So, boys, we have both... Everybody has mentioned a Netflix film. Well, guess what? I'm mentioning a fucking Netflix film on my list.
Oh, boy.
Welcome to the fucking future. My number 2 is... I know, yeah. My favorite... I wish I could have seen this film in theaters. I actually did come to the Music Box, but I was like already working on something, so I couldn't like make the drive out. My second favorite film of the year was Sandy Tan's Shirkers.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Shirkers is incredible, and I think it's better if I just read off the synopsis, because it's better than anything I could have like just related just to you. Is like, in 1992, teenager Sandy Tan shoots Singapore's first road movie with her enigmatic American mentor, George, who then absconded with all the footage. The 16mm film is recovered 20 years later, sending Tan, who is now a novelist living in Los Angeles, on a personal odyssey in search of George's footprints. It is one of the most visually audacious, most psychedelically edited, like crazy, like documentary, like quasi-fiction, quasi-true story, like documentaries I've ever seen. I absolutely fucking love this film. Like, I watched the trailer and I was like, oh my God, I need to watch more of this. And it's also just a very beautiful ode to the malleability of time and memory. Like, I'm always going to remember this one excerpt from my time in undergrad, where I was like learning about film and editing, and how editing is the elapsure. It is the conflation of time and space, where you can just like totally change the topography of a scene, and how people are actually able to navigate through that scene just by how you edit it. You can make a place larger, you can make a place smaller, you can make it taller, you can make it wider, you can make it deeper. It's like, and that's what I felt like this film was. It was just a labyrinth of mirrors and just like emotions, and just like trying to not only see who George was, but Sandy, like looking at who she was back then. And just it's also just a fascinating little documentary of a film that, I don't want to spoil anything, but given the nature of how that footage was recovered, it could never have been made. It could never be made into the film that it was originally supposed to be. So now Shirkers is a documentary of a film that does not exist, with the footage that would have been used to create said film, and it is still an extraordinary film in and of itself, just because it is this, it's one peek at an alt history artifact that I feel like had that film actually existed, it might be one of my favorite fucking films of all time, which is just extraordinary. So I absolutely, emphatically, endorse going to see Shirkers. It's incredible. I love it.
I actually had no idea that it was on Netflix because I had been hearing a lot about it, so I did not realize that. So now I got to watch it.
Now you got to watch it. You would definitely love this.
I was going to say everything I've read about it.
Yeah, it is definitely up your alley.
Sounds not up my alley.
That's okay. It's very pretty to look at.
It sounds like a very, like you said, psychedelic version of an Abbas Kiarostami film from the 90s.
Yep.
It's just,
that's it.
Meta beyond the point of deconstruction, and yet folding back in on itself, and yet shot like crazy fucking.
In a beautiful ode to the friendship of the people who made it, and how you can never
go back to that moment.
Yeah, you can never go back to that moment. Shirkers is always going to be this sort of incomplete time capsule that will bind these people for the rest of their lives, and it's as much an artifact as it is a time in their life. So
yeah, I gotta watch it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
So that was your number 2.
That was my number 2.
Well, my number 1. Ha! Just kidding. My number 2. Okay, so I just want to preface this by saying that I know snuff films are not usually talked about. No,
Please continue.
No, but I do want to say that my number 1 and 2, I feel like I say this every year and I don't give a fuck, but are kind of a nice little 1-2 punch, because I truly believe that my number 2 is a timely film, but not a timeless film, whereas my number 1 will end up being, I think, a timely and a timeless film. So I fully concede that maybe in 5 to 10 years I won't think this much about the film I'm about to talk about. But in this moment, in this vacuum of time, I can't not stop thinking about it and how it fits into this current place and time.
Film Tank is nothing if not a time capsule of our entire evolution of filmmaking.
It is.
Going back to the first couple episodes of you talking about your sort of nascent affinity for horror films, or even your total revulsion of superhero stuff.
Yeah,
it's
still partly there.
Yeah, but still, it's incredible.
No, yeah.
It's incredible to see this arc.
Oh yes.
So it's been an epic journey.
My number 2 is Joseph Kahn's Bodied, which is a YouTube film, because that's the kind of world we're living in.
Oh, boy.
A YouTube film. Sorry, it's just the way you said it.
It's unfortunate, but
it's unfortunate.
It is not a YouTube film.
Your second favorite film is It's Unfortunate.
It's not a YouTube film in quality. I don't know. Whatever you think of when you think of YouTube film is completely fair, but it's just a film that YouTube acquired. They just paid enough money to, I guess, be the platform that gets to stream it. And I'm glad they did, because I got to watch it for free, because you can sign up for YouTube Premium, or whatever they call it, for free for the first month.
YouTube Red.
Yeah, so I got to watch it for free. And I gotta say, I fucking love this movie. It is everything that is happening right now, from everybody's current discourse to the reflection on past discourse to the erasure of the bridge of how we got there to now. It is whitewashing. It is ghettoizing. It is so many things, and yet it is also trying to eviscerate these notions of that anything is black and white, or that context is somehow all encompassing. For example, let's just take the idea, because it's all about battle rap and whatnot. And so, we look at the history of rap, for example, and, listen to an Eminem record from 15 years ago, and I personally still stand by them as documents of music. I do. What they were back then was crazy and, of that time and place, and yet that doesn't also mean that even if we know better now, that it was somehow okay then to have such misogyny and homophobia as quote unquote jokes.
It was a time when a rapper could not so much as wear a pink polo without being lobbed with homophobic pejoratives and just basically chased out of the music industry, and That was a very, very different time.
Absolutely.
It was a time of performative masculinity and of just over the top aggression.
Yeah, and that's also why I really want you to watch this movie one day. Just watch it once.
Yeah.
You don't ever have to watch it again.
We should watch it sometime.
But I genuinely want to have a conversation after it because this is about a white male who is going to enter the the realm of battle rap because he's currently writing his dissertation on the use of the N-word in battle rap. And so he has an idol that he loves, who's a very, in this movie, prominent African-American battle rapper, and he goes to see one of his performances and then kind of bothers him after the show. And, you know, from the first scene on, that rapper, as much as he kind of finds him endearing, because he's just like, oh, he's just a white kid who's harmless, whatever, he also doesn't not rip open what he's saying, because he's like, so what are you doing? He's like, I'm writing a dissertation on the use of the N-word during battle rap, and he goes, oh, so you want to say the N-word? He's like, no, I'm just trying to look at the rhetoric behind. He's like, okay.
So you wanted to say the N-word.
Yeah,
okay.
you know, and he's not even, like, acting like he's mad, but he's just, you know, obviously telling it like it is.
Yeah.
And so the two of them develop this kind of friendship because it turns out that this white boy is actually kind of decent at battle rap because of his background in, and yes, the movie makes fun of this, but slam poetry and other things like that. Yeah. And because of his vast array of pop culture references and academic, you know, shit that he can bring out at a moment's notice.
I will say that there was one line, and I think I've mentioned this before on the podcast, that I saw in the trailer that I thought was actually a very good line. It was like he was like getting in some guy's face, like, just because you look like Kim Jong-un, you're not ill, son. Like, that was actually a pretty fucking that was a pretty dope line.
And the movie will basically have a conversation with itself in trying to say, why do we, and I say me and you, take pleasure from something like that? Because he actually goes into that battle specifically not going to use any Korean references.
Right.
And it's not until he starts failing miserably that he finally says, okay, fine, fuck it.
Right.
And then he pulls all of them out, and they're actually good lines.
Yeah.
And so then it becomes this uncomfortable nature of, you know, falling up.
Why? Yeah.
And the last thing I'll say about this movie before I pass it off, but I genuinely think it's a movie to watch. You can hate it, you can love it, but there is so much happening in here that it's impossible not to react to it and not to talk about it, I think, afterwards. But the final sequence, which is kind of 40 minutes long at the end, which is this elongated actual rap battle that happens between many characters, including the main characters and some of the supporting characters. 40 minutes, almost all battle rap that actually spectacularly, spellbindingly wraps up everybody's character arc in satisfying, unsatisfying ways, and in dramatic and yet trivial, and yet some of the best songwriting I've heard anywhere.
Joke characters get their joke ending. Serious characters get their serious ending.
And it is fucked up. It is so good. And it is genuinely something that, like, when that sequence was over, I wanted to watch that sequence again. And instead, I actually just ended up watching the film again. Because I was just like, no, because part of it is a...
Lin-Manuel who?
Kind of. And this movie comes down on, I think, the right side of the fence, which is that it doesn't try to have an answer as to what is right and what is not right in a culture that was made. Because first of all, this was made by an Asian American actor, filmmaker.
Yeah, he's done a lot of music videos too.
Right, centered around a white guy entering a predominantly African American culture. So there's a lot happening here as far as the melting pot goes. But the movie does say, no matter what, whether your jokes are good or whether your intent was pure, words have consequences. And it completely sticks that landing to a point where it's just kind of eerie how in a world in which, and the movie makes fun of this because the movie makes fun of everything, which is kind of the point, in a world where we have these micro moments of seeing one thing on Twitter and then retweeting it with your own joke about it, even though you know literally nothing about that situation. And I've been guilty of this too, you know. Maybe the discourse is so fucking noisy that we should all just shut up for 1 second because we don't truly understand
what we're saying.
Yes, and how it can be offensive in its own right, even if we consider ourselves as quote unquote liberals or
Right.
friends to all and whatnot. So I just think it's kind of spectacular. It's such a under the radar film that it makes me sad that because it went to YouTube that probably nobody's going to watch this, but in reality it would have been a talking piece for good or for worse. So number 2 for me was Bodied by Joseph Kahn.
Wonderful. My number 2 was just a wonderful, whimsical film that made me smile and happy at the movie theater both times I saw it.
Wreck-It Ralph 2?
No.
I was going to say the 25th anniversary of Schindler's List.
Damn, son. Wow.
Now, see, Body would tell me that I'm a horrible person even if I was just kidding.
Yeah.
Just fair.
Be something if... No, not going to go.
Yep, don't go there. Don't go. Just tell us what your second film was. Just tell me what your film is.
This is not good for me.
Yep.
If I do that, yep, that's fine.
Yep.
My second film was.
I'm proud of you.
You know what? I'm taking a step towards recovery.
Good. Yep.
My second film of the year was Mary Poppins Returns.
Okay.
Which I thought was.
I was way off.
Okay.
God damn it. You made the.
Okay. Yep. I thought this film was an absolute delight, and I really enjoyed every set piece in this film, and for different reasons, too. I thought the lighting here, especially in some of the later scenes, was fantastic. I thought the acting performances were really good, especially Emily Blunt and Lin-Manuel Miranda. And then, Ben Whishaw, too. Can't forget about him. He was wonderful as well. And Colin Firth. This film just had a lot of things that made me feel happy at the movie theater, but at the same time, I enjoyed and thought that there was wonderful songwriting, wonderful script writing, and just good glue that held these different songs and performances and set pieces together. And even if the story is not super original, as it's very similar to the original Mary Poppins, and the final message isn't, completely different than the original Mary Poppins or other films of this kind of ilk, that to me was not the point. The point was that this film was supposed to be entertaining and make people laugh and smile and feel good, and I feel like it accomplishes that in almost every way. And nothing really signifies that to me better than the wonderful final scene with people flying on balloons around and singing the final number, which to me reminded me a little bit of the final number at the end of the original Muppet movie, which was one of the most heartwarming, wonderful things that is what my personal belief of what something like heaven or something like that would be like, where people are just happy and are able to be themselves and are just in their own element. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful film that does have its own drama through it, and does have sadness, and does have people coping with actual real life things like death and other things like that. But at the same time, this is just whimsical and fun and really has pretty much everything in it. So I was a huge fan of Mary Poppins Returns, and I'm glad it turned out the way it did, because to me, when I first heard about this film, I couldn't have been less interested. And yet the final product turned out to be just a absolute delight.
I just want to say that Colton Burpo would want to have some words with you on your interpretation of heaven, because he's been there, and it's not quite like that.
Okay. Thanks for clearing that up.
That's a joke that just kind of went over my head. So.
Colton Burpo is the little boy who said he went to heaven when he was dead for 3 seconds. It was based, there was a movie on it called Heaven is for Real. And then it was found out that the parents told him to say that, of course. And
of course.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm just reaching deep for those Christian deep cuts like I do.
Oh, yeah.
I was using heaven as kind of like a.
I know.
It was just a nice time, Nick.
Simple example,
Yeah.
but that's okay.
Yeah.
I really wanted to bring up a Colton Burpo reference.
Yeah.
Thank you for
I thought that.
It's, when you have that kind of
sounds
last
like
name.
That sounds like a fucking character from Star Wars.
Yeah, pretty much. I will say I also saw Mary Poppins Returns, and I also thought it was adorable, and I had a lot of fun watching it.
Yeah. It is a film that I feel like is easy for people to watch and enjoy what they're watching.
Yeah.
So, I thought it was wonderful. And again, the performances in that were also quite wonderful, as mentioned earlier when I was talking about it.
Yeah.
So, moving on
to
our number one film of the year, starting with Tucson.
My number one film of the year. Speaking of Christian deep cuts, this film came out.
Shack.
This film came out.
That was 2017, so now
technically it came out in 2017, but it didn't reach a mass United States audience until 2018.
Okay.
All I have to ask is, will God forgive us? Because my top favorite film of this year is Paul Schrader's First Reformed.
Yes.
That film is fucking incredible. Paul Schrader, if you don't know, is the that's how you pronounce his name correctly, right?
Yeah,
Paul Schrader?
I think it's Schrader.
Schrader, yeah, Paul Schrader. He is a legendary screenwriter who has worked with Martin Scorsese on several films such as Raging Bull and Taxi Driver. And basically what First Reformed is it's basically like 21st century Taxi Driver meets Winter Light by Ingmar Bergman.
Yes, it is.
I know that because he's actually cited that as a reference to it, and I know
it's very clear.
And it's very, very clear. I know that. It's like I haven't actually seen Winter Light. I've just talked.
One of my top 50 films of all time.
I have to watch it. Yes. I very much enjoyed this film. I thought it was extraordinary. I thought that Ethan Hawke was just exemplary in his role as Reverend Ernst Teller of the First Reformed Church, and everything from beginning to end was just absolutely my shit, because it was just this absolute dark night of the soul of this man in a spiritual crisis, trying to find some cause to reanimate that sort of that faith, that momentum, and then finding it in one of the most dark and complicated conflicts that defines our era right now, our entire lifetime right now. And I loved it from...
It's hard to see the forest from the trees.
It's hard to see the trees at all. It's hard to see the trees at all, fucking Nick. Oh my God. It was extraordinary.
Can I say?
Yes, please.
The topic of this film.
Yes.
I absolutely loved it. I was gonna mention it as an honorable mention, but I kind of thought you might be mentioning it, so I was waiting until now to say that I very much enjoyed this film. Obviously, two of my favorite films of all time being its influence. I don't know that I ever enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed it as a sum of those two parts.
Right, exactly, yeah.
But it's fantastic.
Right.
It's fantastically acted. It's fantastically made. It's definitely one of the best things I've seen all year.
Yeah.
And I'm not actually, this is not a joke, and I mean that sincerely, because it's going to sound like one, but actually I was kind of surprised that I really enjoyed Cedric the Entertainer in his random role. It was this weird...
It sounds like a joke, but you're right, because he was really fucking good.
Yeah.
It's like in Gone Girl when, what's his fucking
Tyler
name?
Perry.
When Tyler Perry actually delivers a pretty fucking great, line. You say that and somebody laughs haha, I bet he was. No, he actually really was.
He just shows up to be the kind of, not the face of the church, but the kind of spiritual advisor to people below him, which in this case is the Reverend himself.
He is he plays the quintessential televangelist to a T.
And but he also seems really grounded. He doesn't seem like the kind of evil. It's just he's more of a victim of just that corporatization.
Yeah, he's more of
I don't take him as someone who's a grifter.
Yeah,
just someone that bought a little too much into the globalization of this shit.
Yeah, and he's it's the devil you can live with, the evil that you can abide for the in the sake of good. And I'm just man, there's degrees, there's levels to this shit, and sometimes it's just it's it's granular as a line in the sand, or it's as uncrossable as a fucking wall, as a brick wall. Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's a great film, and also Amanda Seyfried.
She was incredible.
Fantastic.
Yeah, she was so good in this. Yeah,
she, and especially for a character who has, for a lot of the movie, has to essentially be kind of a voice piece for a different character in a lot of ways, you know, because that's kind of her initial role. Not to say that she doesn't evolve out of
but
that.
she grows out of it, yeah.
But that a lot of what we know about her is what we know about her loved one,
right?
And how that affected her and whatnot.
The final 20 minutes of this film was just like, oh man, it's like somebody just wrapped my body in barbed wire and put a fucking coat over me, because there was a lot of tension. It was really hard to move. It was really hard to fix myself out of that seat because I just felt bound, like I was just about to explode. Holy shit!
Well,
yeah, it was a lot. I love this film.
It's a good film.
Yeah.
So that was your number one.
Yep.
First Reformed.
It was so enjoyable. It was the exact opposite of drinking Drano.
It would be, yes. My number one, had to think about that for a second because I was now just visualizing Ethan Hawke pouring.
I wasn't going to say anything. I was being cheeky about it.
No, I mean, that's what happens. Anyway, my number one is a film we have mentioned on this podcast, and it is Revenge.
Ooh.
Yes, this French production of a kind of modern-day horror film and I hate to be this talking point, but of the Me Too era, so to speak. I think what I said earlier, that it transcends that because it is a genuinely great horror film, message aside. Like, it is thrilling, it is uncomfortable, it is terrifying, it is staggeringly staged. I mean, the geography of this kind of desolate canyon area is so well utilized, from the open vastness of some of the chase scenes, like when all three of them are initially on their vehicles, which I love how they all have a different vehicle, which I feel like those vehicles say a lot about those characters, from the lazy guy who's on the four-wheeler, which is like literally he hasn't gotten off the couch, he's just allowed to, drive that, so on and so forth. I won't get too much into the symbolism.
Yeah.
But there's a lot there, I think, that you can read from every inch of this film, to the cave scene, which is so gorgeously lit and tableau-esque framed, and
even everything down to the logo on the beer can that they're drinking from, and then that ends up getting burnt onto her body in a way very interesting.
I agree, and I was going to say Matilda Lutz, who plays the main character of Jen, is so good in this. She was almost my favorite female performance of the year, so I can say, I won't say who, obviously, but she was right up there because she completely and convincingly plays every turn in this film. When she is in the first 15 to 20 minutes, she is a certain kind of person, and that person is not morally bad or good, but is so susceptible to prejudgments and victimization and whatnot that by the time she is literally reborn, she completely and ultimately sells that, not as a transformation, but as a literal phoenix rising from the ashes. That's who she has been all along. It's just she didn't need to be that until
she found that in herself.
Yes, and it was so amazing to watch personally. And this is obviously directed by a female, which is very important, and I think it really shows by Coralie Fargier, who so fantastically takes the male gaze of the first 10 minutes or so, and that completely washes away by the time the shit has gotten real. And despite the fact that she is literally from like the 30-minute mark on running around in her underwear, shooting guns, and being a quote-unquote badass, it is always empowering and yet never sexy. And it makes such a difference.
That's a fine line, yeah.
And it makes such a difference when you have, I think, a female auteur behind the camera, because they know what it looks like when a man, because we've seen that movie a million times, and as much as I like a Laura Croft, icon of a, heroine, it is very old and very unnecessary these days, and we don't need to put them in push-up bras just to take them seriously.
Yeah.
And to go along with what you were talking about her advancement through this, and also about the male gaze throughout this film, one of the most interesting parts, other than just the actual action on the screen, is to step back and think about the fact that the finale of this film literally takes place inside a home with the man that she came with.
Yes.
Who is really the biggest villain at the end of the day, and it does a lot of dastardly things throughout here, almost like a comic book villain to an extent. But really, it's interesting because he's
like way too organized for this shit. As far as like
for something
that
that wasn't supposed to happen. Like he's pretty great. Now I got to open the contingency.
But the fucked up thing about it is his composure. And the fact that the other two do not have that makes me feel like he's probably done this before.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Even if it was at a smaller scale, obviously.
Yeah.
But just the kind of payoff type whatever.
Yep.
He's the kind of guy who kept women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got to say, the three guys are so wonderfully cast and written because they are three different types of complicity. You have the pretty, I would say, the standard one, which is, I think, even us three in this room, as far as even if we witness far less severe things, but the guy who watched it and just
didn't do anything,
went into the other room and decided that that's not his problem and
right,
whatnot.
right.
To the guy who obviously committed the act and went through it, to the guy who basically acknowledges it, like that it's bad and whatnot, but because the event is over and is not his problem, just basically feels that she should be more happy that she can make money from this and be quote unquote better off than she should be upset about the actual event. And obviously he becomes the worst, because I do think in a lot of ways that's what perpetuates something like this.
Just the craven, opportunistic, like. Ugh.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I'll point out one little detail, and there's a million little details, but one little detail that I absolutely love, and if anyone watches it for the first time, definitely you'll notice this now or rewatch it, is that I love that the arrival of his two friends to the compound is shown as a tracking shot of behind Matilda Lutz's character. She goes to the fridge and then comes back, and then she noticed them staring through the glass doors, literally in a barbaric, almost animalistic, like, oh, girl, whatever. And that is completely folded in on itself when the guy thinks he's alone in the house and has gotten away, only to walk out naked into his living room and find that girl is now on the other side of the glass with a fucking shotgun, ready to end this once and for all. Yeah. And it doesn't even call attention to that kind of role reversal and cinematography, editing.
But it's
style.
there, and that's there for you to notice. Yeah,
it is fantastic.
Yeah.
And I could heap mountains of praise upon this movie, but I genuinely think that besides the fact that this movie feels like it was made for this year, this movie will never, unfortunately, not be relevant to society and what we are dealing with.
I see.
And I say we, I mean not us.
Right.
But unfortunately, what we're allowing to just happen on a systemic level and whatnot.
Right. I see now where your framing was with your number one and your number two. Now I see what your argument is. That
I try.
Yeah.
So my number one was Revenge by Corley Fargiat.
Wonderful.
I hope.
So, my number one of the year was on the top of my list basically from the day that I saw it. And even though I had debates between that and the other, mostly two films, even though I really did like BlacKkKlansman a lot, but Roma and Mary Poppins Returns were also right in contention for my number one spot. But this one, I always came back to it. And that's why it is number one at the end of the year. And that is Mission Impossible Fallout.
Oh, okay.
Which was just
I can see that.
the most entertaining film I've seen in a long time.
You excited about the next ones?
No.
Okay.
Actually,
Ooh.
I mean, I am, but
Well, this is a pretty stark no, so I was just like,
the idea that they're going to be shot together and bring back two characters that are dead
I didn't hear about that.
Yeah.
I only know that they are going to be shot back together and that it was going to be Cruz and McQuarrie returning, so therefore I was like, well, that's
No,
all I need.
I'm interested, but when I heard about like weaving back in Alec Baldwin and Henry Cavill, I was not interested.
They're both coming back?
That's what I heard. I mean, if it's for like one scene and but why is that a thing gets released?
You can do one of them. You can't do both.
Anyways, that being said, obviously I'm looking forward to those films, but what I've heard about them, I've been less than enthused. This film, however, came out with one of the best trailers in cinematic history, in my opinion, and then somehow found a way to deliver on that promise.
Yeah.
This was just a 2-hour and 15-minute roller coaster from start to finish. There were so few low points, and the low points felt like they were needed in this film. The story really just landed on high and low levels. And also, as something that I mentioned earlier when talking about Adventures of Infinity War, and obviously this is to a lesser extent, this film, even though Jeremy Renner is not in this, he was in the earlier last two films, this film weaves together so many fucking characters throughout its entire structure, and yet still somehow ends up with the torch being passed from Michelle Monaghan to, why am I forgetting her name?
Rebecca
Ferguson, in a very cathartic moment where Michelle Monaghan almost acknowledges that, stop feeling bad for me. My life is so much better because I was with you and you really taught me about yourself, and I took from that what has made me into be a better version of myself, which this is not the kind of film that gives off, the Mission Impossible films have not given off a lot of great life and learning moments, but I thought that this one was really important with that. In addition, it brought back an old villain who I thought was actually better in this one than the last one. And also, too,
I think it also retroactively makes him better in the last one.
Yeah.
Like, the idea that wasn't the only time we got to see him makes his kind of stalling, chess-esque villain all the better, in my opinion, retroactively.
Yeah. And there really was just nothing like sitting with our I guess we've had many times before, Brian and his son in the IMAX theater, and just chowing down on a large popcorn and watching this film on the IMAX screen. That
I was
just,
like, wait, what? But I wasn't there.
Yeah, no. Was just absolutely phenomenal. All of the major set pieces obviously looked and were played fantastically. But then all of the action sequences and the fight sequences were just choreographed so well. And had such well-done comedic timing throughout them. This film really, to me, had everything. And I've come to terms a little bit with the fact that the ending scene probably does linger on a little too long. But at the same time, there's still plenty there to just absolutely enjoy from start to finish in that last 30 minutes or so of the final scene. I just love this film. There was so much about it that made me enjoy watching it. And this is a film that, to me, goes by in a breeze, even though it's 2 hours and 15 minutes or 2 hours and 20 minutes or something like that. And it's just a really put-together film and a series that, kind of like the Fast and Furious series, has really just gotten better with age.
Yeah. So. I gotta say, I don't think there's more of a 2018 moment in cinema than Henry Cavill reloading his fisticuffs.
Yeah, and growing his fucking beard while doing it.
Yeah, that mustache too.
Yeah,
you got to have it.
I'm glad that that was worth derailing the entire DC cinematic universe.
Let's just be honest.
Yeah. Hey, he got fired from that too. He's probably like, cool.
Yeah,
I'm out.
Yeah.
All I had to do was grow a mustache.
Yeah, that's it. I've been phoning it in this entire time.
No, this movie was fucking awesome.
It is fantastic.
It is just the culmination of what McQuarrie and Tom Cruise have been doing, and it just
this franchise.
I really don't know if it could get any better than this.
No, but this franchise has clearly, like you just mentioned, Fast and the Furious, kind of in the same boat, which is that by the fifth film, it has reached these new heights because of a new auteur who is kind of now singularly defining the aesthetic of this franchise 5 films later.
Yeah.
And we're all the better as film viewers for it because now we get treated to this, and it is someone who obviously action films almost never make it into. Because even Revenge, I wouldn't call action, even though there's some good set pieces. Mm-hmm. This was actually also at like my number 11 or something, but I purposefully didn't mention it because I wanted to make sure you said your piece. But I also fucking love this movie. It is so gorgeously shot. It uses the IMAX cameras so wonderfully. Even at home, when you see the just tall monolith of the nothingness above that cliff when he's sliding off, to the edge, and little things like that are just so well done.
Also, too, I feel like this film, even with the kind of ending and the final moment in that kind of makeshift hospital that they have there, which is really wonderful, there are a lot of little moments throughout this film that are truly kind of heartbreaking. Even though it's kind of just a scene that is not real, but the scene that is totally stolen from Heat, where they are going to try to get back whatever his name is, and they put on the masks that are seriously just literally taken from the first scene in Heat, and they just go in and murder everybody.
Can I just say...
I know you were bummed that scene wasn't actually happening.
And I don't mean that because of like me always being a dick. Like if this movie had at least the gumption to slightly lean into that kind of like evilness, because he was in a tight spot where he had
the type of plausible, functional, like the type of plausible perfunctory evil that one would have to commit in a sort of situation of Mission Impossible.
Yeah, and I'm not saying the movie is worse for not doing that.
Right.
But I will admit that I would fully...
Yeah.
Like, I probably would have put that in my top 6. And it would be shot and edited the same way. I mean, I love the dream-esque nature of the shooting, which obviously that's why. But even if it was shot and edited like that, where it would have been this surreal moment of, like, Ethan Hunt's character having to commit acts of atrocities that he had been trying to obviously prevent for 5 films, that would have been a sad and yet kind of wonderfully sober moment.
Yeah, but I don't think that, as much as I would really appreciate that sort of moment, I think that audiences would go to a film like Sicario in order to like get that sort of vibe of like seeing the sort of seedy, like morally like gray sort of tactics that law enforcement would have to abide to in order to like affect what is ostensibly supposed to be good, versus like Mission Impossible, which operates in a totally different lane of like fantasy, like science fiction fantasy.
But that being said, I completely am with you, Tucson,
right?
And I actually do like that it played out the way it was,
right?
Where
Yeah.
It showed you what that would be like,
right?
Made it feel real, even though it was kind of just like a dreamy type sequence.
That reality is a fantasy within the universe of Mission Impossible is a comment on the actual quality of the series itself.
Yeah, something we haven't gotten in a while, I feel like, in this series, and in really any Tom Cruise film, is him having to coldly execute people in the middle of daylight later on in the film.
Yeah.
Which is, even though they are bad guys, like...
But they're not bad guys.
I mean, it is one of like the hazards of the job.
Yeah, I was going to say that's why even though this is obviously what was always going to happen, that wouldn't have been out of the realm of what technically he does for a living.
Sure.
So that's why I was like in my head, I'm like, oh my god, because it's happening right now on screen, that means there's a 1% chance that. Because at first it was 0, but until it just presented it, I'm like, now there's a 1% chance that, it's going to go there. Yeah. And the fact that it didn't is, honestly, like I said, it did not make the film worse or anything like that. I just thought that would have been a pretty bold mainstream choice.
It would have been.
And I think it would have gotten away with it, personally.
Probably.
Not like it should then turn into misery porn and Lars von Trier, Ethan Hunt's character, of just like every scene we cut to him and he's going to maybe pull the trigger on his temple or something. Like, no, we don't have to do that. But looks like this is the real Mission Impossible. I just can't seem to die.
The real Mission Impossible is learning to live with myself and all the things I've done.
Well, should you choose to accept it. I don't.
That's literally like a fucking line out of Camus.
So anyway,
Yep.
I just mimed myself shooting myself like 7 times in a row.
Shit, man.
Anyway,
So yeah, that's what
that's
we've
a
got.
2018 mood right there.
Oh my god.
If anybody out there has any lists that they would like to have us see,
Yes,
and
we will read them
talk
off.
about on an episode, please feel free to send us your top 6 of 2018 to us at filmtankshow@gmail.com. So we will have our second part of our episode coming up here that we're going to record right now, but you can listen to it anytime as part 2 of our top 6 of 2018 will be on our next episode. So we will catch up with you then here on Film Tank.